Hi everyone, join me today as we paint this Plumeria flower in watercolor. If you are interested in watching this video without ads and with many bonus extras like a traceable sketch and scans of my painting layer by layer, you can do so for less than the price of a cup of coffee over on my Patreon channel. The link is on the screen and also in the description box below. If you've been a follower of my channel for a while, you will know that I normally work on Baohong cold pressed paper, but today I'm going to use Baohong hot pressed paper. Hot pressed paper is a lot smoother and dries a lot quicker than cold pressed paper, but for the fine detail work that I'm looking for on the edges of the petals of this flower, I don't want the ridges that there are in cold pressed paper, so I'm going to use hot pressed 300 GSM paper. This is a 9 by 12.2 inch piece of paper. If I had a square 9 by 9, I would use that because this is going to be a square painting at the end of the day, but I don't, so I'm going to have to trim the edges. I'm going to start with my sketch already on the page. I've done it as lightly as I can in pencil. Because it's a white flower, I don't want to leave any pencil on it at the end of the day. I don't mind pencil on the outermost petals because I'm going to do a dark background to make the white flower pop forward at the end. So I'm not worried too much about that, but I am concerned about the inner edges where there is the edge of the petal meeting the white center. I've made that as light as I can, and also those central white ribs on the inside of the petal. I've actually done the lines on either side in yellow watercolor pencil so that it will disappear when I put water down. If you don't have a watercolor pencil, then just do those lines really light on the central rib. Because this is a white flower, I'm going to do my shadow color first. So I'm going to put my shadow down first and then my yellow later. I find if I do it the other way around and do the yellow first and put my shadow color on top, that the yellow then gets a greenish color to it. So that's why I'm going to work in reverse and do the shadow color first. I think I'm going to use neutral tint as my shadow color. As its name suggests, it is quite a neutral shadow color, even though it's got a little bit of blue in it. But I think that that's my best choice for this. And I'm going to do neutral tint really watered down on the right hand side here. And I think it's important that you've got 2 beakers of water, because when you are wanting to put clean water down, you don't want to be constantly changing your water or possibly dipping into water that's not clean. So I'll rinse off in the left, and anytime that I'm wanting to pick up clean water, I'll pick up from the right. So I'm going to work one petal at a time. I'll start on the left here. So we know that there is this rib or fold at the side here. That is going to be our accent white that we want to leave completely untouched for now. And I'm going to put shadow on the inside and then come back to that. When I put my shadow color down, I think actually I'm going to start on this top one because that's the easiest one to see the contrasting shadow. When I put my water down, I'm going to do it on the center here. I'm going to not put water down on the fold over, and I'm also going to avoid putting water down that central rib. So I'm going to put water everywhere else on the petal. I'm going to take my water right up to the edge there. As I said, hot press paper does dry a lot quicker than cold press. Because of that, I try to get as much water as I can before I start dropping my color in, because it does dry almost in front of your eyes as you're working with it. But I also don't want pooling of water to take place. So that's why I might do 2 passes of water on the petal before I come in with the shadow color, rather than dropping a whole lot of water in one location. So here I'm taking it up to the central rib, but not putting water over. We also want to be aware, as we're going to start putting shadow down, that we don't want this whole petal to go grey. Otherwise the whole painting is going to look quite dull. Be very aware when you're putting your color down of where your accent white is on each petal, and really try to not go anywhere near that with your shadow color as you're putting the shadow color down. Now I feel that my water layer is enough and also consistently even on that whole petal. So I'm going to pick up, it's quite thick, yeah, I'll just add a little bit. I'm looking for the thickest consistency, but I don't want it sticky at all. So I'm not going to load my brush too much. I don't want the shadow color to go too far, but I will start where the shadow is the strongest, and that's along this side here. I'm just going to rinse off my brush. I don't want to add water to it, so that's why I'm going to tap off my brush, but I'm going to just help this shadow to blend smoothly. Then I'm going to take the shadow in the lighter consistency and just do a little bit on this side. Even that's a bit too much. I'm going to add a bit more on this side. And now I'm just going to follow the natural lines in the petal and just add a few lines here and there. I'm just cleaning and rinsing off my brush. I want to just do some passes through here and do a little bit of lifting. And I'm just going to take a little bit more shadow color and do one more pass down this left side where the shadow will be the strongest. Rinse and tap off my brush and then just help it to blend. Alright, next I'll do the same thing on this petal here. Taking my clean water, I'm going to leave that side fold over and put water on the rest, avoiding the central rib. Alright, my water is down and even. I'll pick up my neutral tint in a medium consistency. Again, I'm going to start where the contrast shadow is the strongest, which is along this edge. And I'll put some down here. Just rinsing off my brush to get it not so strong. And then blend. There's also a little bit over here. What is just as important as putting the shadow color down in this layer is retaining the white area on the whitest parts of the petal. So make sure that your shadow color doesn't spread across the whole petal. We really want the white areas of the petal to pop by the time we get to the end of the painting, so less is best when it comes to doing the shadow. Rather put some shadow down and then come back and do some more once it's dry if you feel it needs a bit extra, rather than doing too much too early on. I've got a bit of a hard edge here. I'm just going to help smooth it. That's how quickly this hot press paper dries. But I just don't want to add water to it, because then I'm going to get a cauliflower or blooming effect that I'm not looking for. Alright, just picking up a little bit more. I'd like to add some more down here. Alright, I'm happy with that. I'm going to turn my page now to do the next petal, just so that it's easier to access it. Alright, the same again. So the shadow is going to be the most along here, and then down in this corner here. But let's get the clean water down first. Alright, picking up the shadow colour in a thicker consistency. Let's start against that white edge. And then I'll come along this edge here. Looks like it's already dry there. Let me add some water. This hot press paper dries so quickly, and I've got the air conditioner on in my studio today, so that just makes it dry doubly quickly. And there's a bit of a fold here. I'm just going to do some blending here. I'm just going to have to incorporate my mistake there into my painting where I've gone over the line. I think it's easier than trying to lift it later, so I'm just changing my edge and dropping some shadow colour in along there. Just drying off my brush and smoothing off this edge. Alright, and so I'll keep going. I'm going to rotate again. Now I've just got to make sure I'm following the right petal on my photograph. Alright, I think I've got it. Alright, same again. I'm going to do the same thing for the last two. If you are enjoying this video, I would really appreciate it if you would click the like button, and I would love to hear from you in the comments box below. Also, let me know where you're from. I'm a South African living in Thailand, so I'd love to know where all of you are from. Once this layer is completely finished now, I need to let the whole thing dry completely before I even consider bringing my yellow near it. So I'm going to give it a good 15 or 20 minutes to dry completely before I come back for the next layer. If you are following this tutorial on Patreon, on the paid link, then you can refer to the scanned image of layer 1 to check against this one. Now that this layer is completely dry, I want to soften up some of the harder edges of the shadows that I can see have dried with harder edges. I'm going to use an Eradicator brush, which is a stiff bristled short brush. If you haven't got an Eradicator brush, you can use a stiff bristled normal round brush with a fine point. The only thing is, just make sure whatever brush you use that you don't put too much water on. I don't want to smudge the lines, I just want to soften them. So I'm going to put clean water on my brush and tap it off, and then just go softly around the edges. And just in almost a circular motion, you can see I'm softly touching those edges and blending them into the surrounds, and that just neatens up the shadow line. I'm going to move the whole way around the flowers, one petal at a time, and do the same thing. If you don't have hard edges, you can totally skip this step if you don't think that it's necessary. I'm not trying to lift any of the color that I've put down, I'm just trying to soften what's there. So don't scrub too hard, otherwise you are going to lift color and also possibly even damage the paper. I'm just doing it really gently and in soft circular motions. Alright, now I want to spend a bit of time on these fold over areas. Now they are definitely a highlight area of the painting, an area that I want to leave mostly white, but I still want to accentuate the fact that they've got a curve to them. And in order to do that, I'm going to want to put a little bit of a shadow line on the outside edge of each, so that's the edge away from the shadow that I've already put down. I'm going to put some shadow color down and then blend it towards the fold over. I definitely want a considerable white area, so I don't want to put shadow on the whole thing, just a little bit towards the edge here. So for that reason I'm going to work wet on dry, because if I use wet on wet and drop some color in, it's going to spread across the whole thing. So I'm going to work with my number 2 brush, so that I can do detail work and not put too much color down, and then get my shadow color in not too thick a consistency. I'm going to put it down along the outside edge, and then just rinse off my brush and blend it a little. I don't want any hard edge to that shadow, so wherever there is, I'm just going to blend it. And I'm not going to do too much. I've achieved exactly what I wanted, which is a bit of a shadow line here, but still having preserved the white area. So I'm going to move around and do each of the foldovers the same way. For those with full Patreon access, I'm going to call this layer 2. I've cleaned my palette off now because I don't want any risk of my greys getting into my yellows, which would cause it to go green. Also, it's very important, because we're looking for such a pure yellow, that our yellow that we use isn't tainted. So that's why I'd rather not use the yellows from my palette, because there's always something mixed in them already. So I've just put a small squeeze of Hansa Yellow Light and Hansa Yellow Medium into my palette. I'm also going to use Quinacridone Gold, but that I'm happy to use directly from the palette. I'm going to work wet and dry for this layer so that I have control over where my yellow goes. And again, I'll work one petal at a time. I'm going to start with a very watery mix of the Hansa Yellow Light, put that down as my base, and then work my Hansa Yellow Medium and my Quinacridone Gold into that. When I come to each layer now, I'm going to be conscious of the middle rib that I'm wanting to leave white and not put any color in there. I also want my Hansa Yellow Light to be very watery consistency, so I'm putting quite a lot of water into this. I'll also just activate my Hansa Yellow Medium so it's ready to go. So I'll start on this petal because it's the one that's the most accessible to the direction that I want to paint in. So I'll start in the middle, and I want to follow the direction of the lines on the petal itself. So keep a look at the photo reference, and as you're brushing in, brush in the direction that the lines are on the petal. Do a few guidelines like I am now, and then you can go back and fill in between. Also in this layer, don't go too intense with your color too early on. You can see I'm working with a very light brush on the page, and I've got the paint watered down a bit so that it's not too concentrated when I put it down on the petal. Working under the spotlight, it's quite difficult for me to see where my rib is. I think I've gone too close there. I might have to try and lift some out just now. Now I'm going to dip into my Hansa Yellow Medium, and I'm not going to go quite as far as I went with the Hansa Yellow Light. I'm going to stop short. Then with my Quinacridone Gold, I'm going to just start on the center and not go too far. I'm just going to dab off my brush and then just send it a little bit further. This is essentially wet on wet that I'm doing now because of the colors I've laid down before. I'm just brushing really lightly to try and get the colors to blend. Then I'm going to pick up that Quinacridone Gold in a thicker consistency and drop it in down here at the center. I'm just tapping with my brush and encouraging a bit of blending. I'm just going to work around the base of that fold over just to define the edge. I'm just drawing with my brush and trying to encourage a bit of blending here. It's a bit of a hard line there. Alright, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to work through all of the remaining petals and do exactly the same thing. This is completely dry now, but one thing I'm going to do before I move on to the next layer is soften some of the edges. So I'm going to pick up my harder bristled brush again, and using clean water, I'm going to use the brush to soften the edges around the edge of the yellow. I can even work backwards into the yellow areas if I want to, and add some contour lines into the yellow. Whenever we work wet on dry, like I did with the yellow layer, we will always find that the color tends to move outwards to the edge of where the moisture layer is. So you can see here how there is a bit of a hard edge where the yellow color has ended, and that is where I'm going to soften the edges, so there's a bit more of a gradual and softer blend from the yellow into the white. So although as I was working I was always adding more colour at the centre, time will always make the colour drift towards the outside of the wet section, and that is what's happened whilst it's dried. So what you do in this layer is just going to depend on how your yellow layer has dried and whether or not you want to do this blending phase. So I'm going to just work the whole way around the flower, rotating my page as I go and blending the yellow areas petal by petal. I just don't want the yellow colour to spread much further than it already has. That's why I'm making sure that I'm constantly cleaning off my brush and using clean water for my blending. For my Patreon followers, this is the end of layer 3. I'm happy with the overall colours now that it has dried. The only thing I want to do now is increase the contrast in the very centre. I'm going to work wet and wet. I'll probably wet and go a little bit into the yellow with my water, avoiding the white highlight edges, and then I'm going to drop in some Quinacridone Gold and some burnt sienna as well. So let me just put my water down first. Just want to make sure I don't get any water on my white highlight areas. This hot press paper is drying quickly as expected. That's why I'm just doing a redo on some of my areas, and I'm also just making sure it's an even wash and that I don't have any pooling of water anywhere. Now I'm going to pick up my Quinacridone Gold in quite a thick consistency because I don't want it to spread too far. So it's not sticky, but it is thick on my brush, and I'm going to drop that in on the center. I'm just adding a little under each of the shadow areas. And then I'm just keeping on tapping the tip of my brush just so that I can drop more pigment in. Now I'm going to pick up some burnt sienna and tap that right in the very center. And now I'm just going to do some work on blending where I might be getting a hardish edge, like over here. But I'm just making sure I tap off my brush and dry it off so that I don't add any water. and I'm just making sure that my brush is clean each time that I go in. And just picking up that Quinacridone Gold again and coming in along the shadow edge. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to let it dry, but because I've put in quite a lot of pigment here and everything is not completely dry yet, I'm just going to keep an eye on it for the first couple of minutes whilst it's drying, and just keep doing exactly what I'm doing now. That if I can see a hard edge forming, I'm just going to blend it and smooth it so that I don't get any hard edges. And then I'm going to let it dry completely. This is the end of layer 4. Now it's time for the fun but scary part, and that is to do the background. I have taped off a square just so that I can mark the area in which I'm going to work, and I'm going to use a mop brush and also a number 12 round brush. I'm going to want to push the background as dark as I can possibly make it, so I've already pre-sprayed my Undersea Green and my Perylene Green, and I think I'll do it again just so that they are ready to go. I'm going to work with them directly from the pan because I'm looking for it so dark. I'm going to put water down over the whole area using my mop brush. I won't go completely all the way up to the petals until I'm ready. I'm also going to put quite a lot of water down and keep returning back just so that it is completely saturated and gives me enough time to put my color down. And then once I've got my water down, I will use my other brush to get closer to the petals, and then I'm just going to go for it with dropping in the Undersea Green and the Perylene Green. I'm really just trying to get as much water down as I can. I'm not worrying too much about going up to the petals just yet. Just adding as much water as I can in an even consistency throughout. Alright, picking up my number 12 round, I'm going to try and get a bit closer to the edges now. I'm just going to move my palette out the way so that I can rotate my my pad. And I think I need to go down to a smaller brush size. This is a number 4 round. What I can even do is add the smallest bit of Undersea Green into my water. That'll help me see if I've got close to the edge. And I'm just going to use my mop brush on the exterior just to get it even again. You can see already the granulation of the Undersea Green. Undersea Green is a beautifully granulating color, and the wetter the medium is that you drop it into, the more it granulates into its constituent colors, which is ideal for a background like this. In fact, I'm considering trying to do the whole background just with Undersea Green and ignoring the Perylene Green, but I'm going to see how dark I can go with it and make that decision on the fly. Alright, I think we're ready. I can just see it's a bit wet in here. Sorry, a bit dry. Alright, I think I need to go for it. I'm going to stick with this smaller number 4 brush just to start. and because I need to start from the inside out, because it's going to dry closest to these to the petals first. So I've got that Undersea Green in a thick consistency on my brush, just dropping it in there. I'm going to move the Undersea Green off the screen just to make sure that you don't lose sight of the page. Yeah, I love this Undersea Green. I think I'm going to try and just stick with it alone. I'm not rinsing off that brush, I'm just leaving it like that. I'm going to get some Undersea Green on my mop brush and just do a bit of the outside. See, I've still got so much water in places, and that's fine. But I'm just going to try and spread it as I go. Lifting a bit in the corner here where it's pooling, and I think over there. So everywhere's got a little. What I'm going to do is pick up my sharper number 4 brush, and now I'm going to start working around the petals before these areas dry completely. It's already drying there, as you can see, and just try and sharpen the edges. Picking up some of that water there and transferring it across to here. You can see how beautifully the white of the petals starts to pop the more Undersea Green we're able to get directly alongside. I think I'm starting to get to the end of what I'm going to be able to achieve in this layer, because so much is drying, but that doesn't mean I can't come back and add some more in an additional layer. It's not as dark as I would like it to be, so I think what I'm going to do, I'm just going to just do one more pass over here. But I don't want to get streaking, so I'm just neatening up the edges of the petals, but then I'm going to let it dry and come in again once it's dry and do a second layer on the background. I'm just trying to keep this moisture even whilst it's drying. In these areas where it's so wet, I can still gladly move it around. But it's the area against the petals, I can see it's dry here. If I go and try and add something there, it's going to make a hard edge. I've just got to make sure I'm happy with the edges, because I won't be able to change much of that in the next layer. Alright, so I'll let that dry. And this is the end of layer 5. That's completely dry now, so I'm just going to go and do it all again. I have already put some water in my Undersea Green, and I'm going to put my water down first and then come and drop my Undersea Green in the same way that I did in the previous layer. I'm going to work half at a time, this layer. So because of the drying, so I don't want to put quite as much water down as in the previous layer. So I'm going to go a little bit beyond halfway here, but I'm going to do the right hand side first and then the left hand side. It just means I don't have to put quite as much water down. Alright, picking up my Undersea Green in a thick consistency. I'll get a bit closer with a sharper brush. Let me just get some pigment down first. Just putting some Undersea Green on my mop brush now to get that to the exterior of the painting here. Now I'm going to put some water down on the right hand side. I don't even mind picking up a bit of Undersea Green as I do that. Anything to help me intensify my colour and also see where I've got the water down. Picking up my sharper pointed brush. And then I'm picking up some Undersea Green on my mop brush and just seeing if I can increase the intensity here. So I think I'm going to let it dry now and then decide if I want to come in and do a third layer on the background. This is the end of layer 6. I'm pretty happy with that. I think all that there really is left to do is to just try and smooth and even out the screen layer. To do that, I'm going to prep some Undersea Green in my palette, just so that it's even and that I can easily reach for it. And then I'm just going to do a pass over the whole painting. That's just going to even it all out. Alright, I think I'm going to be happy with that. So I'm going to let it dry and then do one final assessment. This is the end of layer 7. I'm happy with that. I have removed the tape, cut a 1 centimeter white border around the edge, and I'm happy to call it a day at that. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments box below. Until next time, bye for now.